So there's a daunting task ahead, right, when we talk about shrinking space, but for a Hungarian, this is no issue, because we live that. So to come back to follow up on what you've been talking about, many people argue that there is in fact an illiberal playbook that aspiring autocrats in the 21st century are reading, and they're implementing it even here in Europe. It has ideas about how to grab power and how to hold on to it, how to transform democracy from a pluralistic, cooperation-based enterprise into a disguise for something, a game, where basically the winner takes all, and the winner sets the rules. There are so many chapters in this playbook, and we have, I think, a good knowledge of that. Just to flag some of the most interesting ones, one is how to eliminate transparency in the use of public funds, or how to subordinate all branches of power to an overbearing executive, how to weaken and overtake autonomous institutions, how to curb judicial independence, how to curtail freedom of association, freedom of assembly, how to do away with media pluralism, how to, in fact, fragment and polarize societies. These are crucial and overarching questions, and there are some key ingredients behind all of them to make them actually work. And I'd say these key ingredients are apathy, fear, and mistrust. Undoubtedly, there must also be a chapter in this playbook on how to weaken civil society, how to attack civic activism. And on this specifically, the liberals actually have a very clear reason why they want to achieve this. It is because civil activism, it's civil society that has the raw energy to fuel freedom, to regenerate freedom. So by stifling that, you're going to the core of your problem. Therefore, efforts to either hinder or vilify or criminalize civil society organizations or activists that we see in Europe now every day are actually meant to stop these activists, this activism, from reaching out to society, and also from monitoring government, from holding it accountable. So if there is such a playbook and there is such a chapter in it, do we have another book? Is there another chapter where we would be able to read the care instructions for what we cherish, for these values that we hold dear about rule of law, fundamental freedoms, democracy? Where is that book? Where do we find it? How do we implement it? To prevent the erosion of these values. And what if the illness has already set in? Where do we turn? What kind of recipe book is there to take medication? Do we have that? Is there an antidote at all? So the bad news is, and I'm sure you've guessed the answer, there's no quick fix, no magic potion, no panacea, nothing that will have an immediate impact. But both for preventing the setting in of the illness and also for fortifying our society against it, there is thankfully some good news, which is that there's indeed a pretty potent mix of vitamins that we can just reach out and take off the shelf. And I'm sure that basically we all know this. There does exist a set of common sense and also innovative methods to prevent some of the attacks on civic space and to prepare ourselves, to brace ourselves against some of the others. These methods can also very well counteract the effects of these three dangerous key ingredients: apathy, fear, and mistrust. So what I'd like to suggest to you today is to actually take this potent mix and promote it to others too. The potent mix will result in building active citizens, civic courage, solidarity, and trust. Now, coming from Hungary, we do suffer the illness. We're trying to take the medication, and we see many Europeans, civil society activists and civil society groups doing this. So what I'd like to now tell you about a little bit is what this potent mix could look like and how you build that. It's not a quick fix, but you need to take it almost like vitamins with a rigorous regimen every single day. And it focuses on 4 main topics, and there could be many others. First one is sustainability. It sounds so boring, but it is very, very crucial. Also, good working methods. Again, very common sense, and I'll tell you more about that. The third one is mobilization and cooperation. And the fourth one is the very core idea of defending and speaking up about what we feel is important. So how do you build the sustainability? I'm talking about experience that organizations in Hungary, but also in Poland, in Serbia, in Croatia, and in many other parts of Europe have had. This could be region-specific, but I think it is interesting also as a sort of a general remedy. So one of the key things that you can see happening in Europe today is attacks on civil society funding. Now, when you see an attack like that, it's not only about funding that you should be concerned about. It's an indicator, a first sign of worse things to come. We know this clearly from Hungary in 2014. There was a very vile attack on, interestingly, a fund that Norway and the EEA countries have pulled together to help foster civil society and democracy in many of the EU member states where this is not strong enough. This fund and the recipients of the fund, many small NGOs in Hungary working on anti-corruption, gender equality, human rights issues, civil society development, were attacked right after the elections that took place in early 2014, which Mr. Orbán won a supermajority again. But all of a sudden, in a few days, there was a backlash or just an attack on civil society organizations and this fund, saying the usual, this money was used not for the purpose it was stated, but rather to fund political opposition. There's a hidden agenda. This is badly intentioned. These are fake NGOs. They're meant to carry out some sort of sinister, ulterior, concealed, hidden agenda. Later on, in 2017, Hungary was the first one, and thankfully still is the only EU member state, which adopted a carbon copy of the legislation that we all know from Russia, which is the Foreign Agent Act. In Hungarian terms, this is an act that's supposed to be targeting foreign-funded organizations. And so the organization that I work for and many others should call themselves foreign-funded if they have foreign funding above about 25,000 euros per year. Now, the foreignness of the funding is really important because that's not only a technical term to describe the source, but it's also a notion that is meant to signify that it's not us, but it's other people telling us what to do, and it's not in our interest. And funnily enough, the money that NGOs could get from the European Commission directly are also considered to be foreign in this sense. My organization and some others have resisted to label ourselves as foreign funding, and today this is a case before the European Court of Justice in the EU court. Third example, something that is a very bad example and could serve as a model anywhere from Poland to other places, is when you tax speech. Putting a 25% on speech that you don't like is a really good way to send out an intimidating message. I'm going to skip some of the others under sustainability, but I think what the message is here is that we need to combat the notion that foreign is bad. When it comes to funding for democracy, democracy is important and support for it is important. You also need to, as a second sort of big vitamin chunk, develop good working methods. Good organizations sustain change and attack in a much better way. How do you build that? It's not easy. It takes a lot of investment, a lot of effort. It requires you to be transparent in your working methods, to set up good governance structures internally to build a strong core for the organization, one that actually is able to display your value set in a easily understandable way. And good governance for many also means being very careful about data security, for example, making sure that your IT system is resilient and your staff are also able to perform with commitment under duress. These are stressful times in a lot of places in Europe. For example, in Bulgaria now, where the Bulgarian Helsinki Committee is facing risk to be shut down for actually doing legal assistance. That's stressful. Organizations need to help their staff with mental health support, with coaching, with showing good leadership. Third one, very important, mobilize communities. This is maybe the best one. When you reach out to others and you not only talk about your own specific issue, but recognize that solidarity needs to be displayed towards others who are vulnerable, and they count on you and you can also count on them, is really important. We need to show more of this today in Europe. It has to be real too. Cooperation, coalition building is something that actually fights against isolation. Promoting the role of civic activism, recognizing that, awarding that is really important. But also we need to be mindful of the fact that attacks happen today, every day. And what is the European Union and institutions doing about that? Not much. Looking at it on the long-term view, there's training, capacity building, potentially funding schemes under what is called the Rights and Values Program. But today, if an NGO or a journalist or a human rights activist is attacked in Europe, they can't do anything. There is no go-to person. There is no fast reaction mechanism. There is no real assistance. There's concern, but concern won't save you. And there's times when you need to have that. The last one, just say no. That was something that we hear often, but I'd say no to anticipatory obedience. And that is, I think, the China example too, a little bit. These attacks are meant not only to target specific individuals or specific topics or specific groups, they're meant to send out a chilling message across the board. An attack on one person will make 50 other people think twice before they speak up. Resist this. Say no. Defend civil society. Defend autonomy. Speak out, but also speak well. Communication needs to be learned. We need to be better at that. We need to invest in that. So a lot of what I've been saying about coming together and working well is actually an investment not only for time of chaos or crisis, but also for every single day. This is how we can help build communities. This is how we can create and nurture active citizens, courage to act and speak up and defend democracy, and also to build solidarity and trust. And this is probably the best antidote. Thank you.
Marta, thank you very much for your engaging talk. And now it's up to you. Questions? Okay, I see 2 hands. Yeah, let's start over there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your reflections. I've one question.
Could
because
you brief introduce yourself?
Nils Zimmermann, Civil Resilience. And this is about the citizens. So in my perspective, one big advantage of the, let's say, uncivil society, which we discussed with researchers on the case of Ukraine, you can find it as well in Poland, that this kind of uncivil societies, they are quite successful in involving citizens, in building cross-sectoral networks between business, politics, party politics, civil movements, grassroots movements. And this is a kind of thing what was, in my opinion, lacking in your presentation, as you had a mainly organizational perspective. But what do you think about that? The potential of the grassroots of the many for financial sustainability, for mobilization, and so on.
Marta?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And this is something that I actually had to skip because of shortness of time. Yes, so much of the attacks focus on allegations of being illegitimate. We haven't been elected, we didn't stand for office, we didn't win, the majority wants that or that, put up with it, deal with it. But in fact, one thing that has to be learned, and these are methods, so they can be used for bad or good, is to be reaching out and mobilizing better. Something where you can build on local communities and make yourself understood. That's the first thing. If we can't communicate why we're interested in protecting, respecting civil society or fundamental rights or the rule of law, we've lost that battle. So we need to be better speaking, and once that is, we've made progress on that, and I think there's quite a lot of progress already being made, then you can actually ask people to support you financially also. So crowdfunding is certainly something that is worthwhile, and it's very interesting to see how that is also something that could be targeted, but there are ways to learn about that. But I agree that in many Central European member states, and not only, of course, but also in Central Europe, and that's why this is our problem in the EU too, many ideas and initiatives are very reliant on funding from what is called abroad. Is it because people are not interested? Or is it because there's difficulties in getting across? In Hungary, we're doing a lot to promote the idea of crowdfunding, of giving, of supporting, and organizations invest in this quite a lot. But at the same time, you have to see that if you don't have free media, it's going to be extremely difficult. I didn't speak about that aspect, and there's tons of others, but without having access to people, to talk to them, to get your message across, it becomes extremely difficult. So actually, I should have said free media is the most important thing, and then everything else I've talked about comes after that. But if you have access to people, then you have a much better and fairer chance of support.
Mm-hmm. The next question, please.
Jonas Teune from the network organization Mid-Ost. I have a question, these shrinking spaces you talk of, are they more motivated by kleptocracy or by ideology? Why are they shrinking? Or are they made to shrink?
Thank you.
Well, is it a general or a specific, country-specific question? Well, the civil society and activism is a nuisance to an autocrat. It's more than a nuisance, it's actually a threat. You talked about how they in power in China are so disbelieving that they actually have that. So there's always this is what keeps them awake at night, I think. And so whether the aim of that project is to hold on to power so that the funds can keep on flowing, or to hold on to power to drive an ideology, is is really important, but in terms of the ways that civil society or civic activism or individual freedom is curbed, doesn't really matter. In the European Union, we see, I think, a mix of both, kleptocracy and also very ideologically driven regimes building up.
Thank you. We have time for one question.
Madeleine Gabriel from Nesta in the UK. I wondered how you think international institutions and international organisations can best support organisations like yours in the context you describe, particularly given the sensitivities about foreign involvement that you've mentioned. You know, how can we be good allies?
This is a question we get quite a lot. Does it help you if we speak out? Do you welcome messages of support? Should we take action? Or will it backfire? Will you be under more stress? We have to see that in the European Union, we live in an extremely luxurious protective regime with all its faults. And so for organizations in Hungary, in Romania, in Croatia, in Poland, in Bulgaria, and also increasingly here in Germany or in Italy or in France, Spain, and sadly the list is growing, and I can go on. I think speaking out and solidarity is the most important. But also that's not enough. So there is thankfully a very intricate legal system, right, that we live in, where we have national legislation, we have EU law, there's tons of courts to go to, strategic litigation and strategic advocacy is really important. This is something that we do quite a lot. And I see how important it is to link the two up, so that you can have the lawyers doing the legal work and the advocates talking to people like you here. And if we never meet, that's going to be less useful, less beneficial than if we do that together. So I would say speak up, take action. There's lots of things that can be done. In this, just this one example with the foreign-funded NGO law in Hungary, which is the Commission launched, the European Commission launched an infringement action. Now it's going to be at the Court of Justice. One member state, Sweden, has decided to intervene. This is a legal opportunity to support one or another side of the legal argument. Sweden said, we can't have this kind of discriminatory, stigmatizing legislation in Europe that infringes on freedom of association. So standing up also means taking legal action, but it takes quite a lot of supportive gestures and pushes from civil society too to make this work. So I think I'd always say support, working together, building coalitions, joining in is really important.